Before I describe how we're going to operate this evening, I want to turn it over to both Joe and Brian if they want to share any comments or any words of wisdom.
You turn that mic on?
I think you're good.
I think I'm good?
Yeah.
Hello? I don't think so. I can't hear myself. Politician that doesn't know how to use a mic. Good afternoon or good evening. Thank you all for coming. The genesis of this idea came from years of watching what was going on in the state of New York and the rest of the country. And we had decided a while ago and tried in 2018 to get this done back then. The governor at that point wasn't really willing to listen to us too much. The idea is very simple. The basic idea of what we're doing is when we're done with all this information gathering, we're hoping to have a place, a clearinghouse of information where the best practices of all the schools are in the same place. And that way, if you're from a suburban or rural or an urban school, you can check with that office and find out what the ideas are or what the tools they're using to keep their schools safe. It's that simple. We're sure that one size does not fit all. We realize that. We realize, for instance, where I'm from in Cattaraugus, Allegheny, and Steuben, our response times aren't going to be the same as they are here in Rochester and Monroe. So we're going to approach our problems a little bit differently. Like I said, that's why we want the ideas and how they work together. We have found during our hearings that each counties have somewhat of a plan already in place, obviously, good plans, and how they work together. But we also know with the different agencies that we need to put that model together to help give them the resources. We need to get training done. We need mental health services. We know these things, but we'd like to hear what you guys are doing in those subjects and how you're working, so we can take that back, put it again in a place, a clearinghouse of information, and somebody could call and get best practices, and they could say, well, in Monroe County they're doing this, or in my case, Cattaraugus County they're doing this. So that's part of what we're here for. We thank you all for coming. We are looking for good ideas and best practices, and we're just hopeful that we get a lot of good ones, and we will then write a report when we're done, and we will give that both to the governor, the Senate, and the Assembly committees to go forward. So thank you very much for coming.
Right.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you, Joe, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come out. I know it's already 6 o'clock, and it's been a long day for most of us, if not all of us. So what I've learned through the years already is, whether it's my military service or prior service as a town supervisor or farmer, it's all about teamwork and working together, and really learning that, hey, maybe this person in this area knows a whole lot more about something that we don't, and why reinvent the wheel when we can use something from Wayne County versus Monroe County or wherever, or across the state, as Joe has said. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from each and every one of you to tell us what's really working and what's not working. And then it's our job as assembly members to take those words and those ideas, and as Joe said, get them back to Albany, get them to the governor's office, and making sure we have the ability to help you all do your job. That's what we are here for. That's what I'm here for. For me to be successful is for you all to be successful and to make your jobs go much easier. So please, talk to us, let us know what's working, let us know what's not working, give us your ideas, and when we're all done with this, we as upstate New Yorkers, we in this area, hopefully we can have a much safer and a better way of protecting our students, our teachers, and all of us around the area. I represent, as Josh said, Wayne County, but also Cayuga County and Oswego County, and because of redistricting, I'll be picking up the town of Webster and Monroe County. So I'm really anxious to hear a lot of the remarks and ideas from other areas. And Mr. Supervisor, again, thank you for allowing us to use this facility. A gorgeous place. Wish we'd have had it back in Lyons, but thank you, sir. And Josh, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you, Brian. Sort of piggybacking on what Joe and Brian said, you're all here tonight because you are subject matter experts. Whether you are in the education space as a district administrator, school security personnel, or teachers, law enforcement, policy experts, we want to hear your views on this very critically important topic. So the way tonight is going to work is that I'm going to be calling individuals or groups based on if you hear multiple people from the same organization, bring you up together, and we just want you to share your experience and what you think we should be doing, what's working, what's not working, and really the direction you think that this topic should go. After you share your thoughts, if myself, Joe, or Brian have any questions, we're going to use then that opportunity to kind of ask for any questions we may have. So to kick it off, I'd like to invite Supervisor Zale if he wants to come up and share his testimony.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time and opportunity to do so, and hoping that maybe you would like to spur the conversation with questions. But first, maybe I'll just say this, that I'm the father of 4 boys, 3 of which that are in elementary school here in the town of Ogden, the Spencerport School District. I was an educator, a teacher, high school for 10 years, a coach for 13 high school sports. I was on the school board in Spencerport for 2 different terms, a legislator that entered into intermunicipal agreements to share our county services with school districts in the forms of SROs, and now I'm the school superintendent here. And one thing in all of my time that I've really kind of seen happen is now that in the town of Ogden we have a police department, and at pretty much any one time, at the most, we have 2 patrol on at any time. And that's at most, we have 2 patrol. Throughout the days, almost every day, there is a need or a call at the school district for some type of need of our services. And one of the things that is clear is that every time that we are responding to an emergency that's over there, that's 1 less patrol that is for the rest of the town. And we've got a great relationship with the school district, very happy to have the school superintendent here, and my former colleague, still colleague, and the former police chief that is now the director of security over in Spencerport. So to say that there's a good relationship between the town and the school district is an understatement. There's a great relationship there, and there's a continual conversation that goes on. I know that the school superintendent did a great job putting out a survey within the last year, and of the top 3 or 4 responses, all of it was school safety related. And I think that there is a call to action statewide for there to be some sort of help from our colleagues in state to assist in exactly what you're doing here. And one thing that I might remind this body and all of our colleagues across the state is that it is the state's responsibility to ensure that there is safe management of our school system. It's not the federal government's responsibility, it is the state's. According to the New York State Constitution in Article 11, it says that the legislature shall provide for the maintenance and support of a system of free common schools. I might suggest that in all the areas where school districts may not be solid on inviting some type of SRO, that part of that conversation has to do with finances. We saw this in Greece. We see this in other school districts where maybe it's a financially related situation. I might suggest that maybe there's an opportunity for the state, as it provides school resources and funding for free public education, as it says, to maintain and support a system, that maybe there is some type of allowance that can be offered or at least allocated for this type of service, whether it's a certain percentage or reimbursement. I do think that is a significant portion of the reason why maybe we haven't been able to increase the number of SROs, or at least that type of service. What I would say is that is the type of service that would benefit both the district, in my opinion, not as the leader of the school district, but also the township, to keep our road patrols on the road, and to also have somebody who can be ingrained within the district that carries the same weight and the same legal authority to handle emergencies throughout the district. That's really the majority of what I wanted to say.
So just to ask a quick question, to put on your parent hat, we did invite some parent, PTAs and different parent groups if they wanted to participate, and unfortunately there were some conflicts. But looking at this as somebody who's been on the school board, has held multiple elected official positions, and as a parent yourself. From a parental perspective and from a community representative standpoint, what are our families really expecting of their schools from that outside the school administration perspective?
Well, I know that both nationwide and statewide that there were a number of surveys that were conducted by school administrators, and rightly so, to actually get that direct feedback. In education, we talk about data-driven studies ad nauseum, but also for good reason. We're getting the collective feedback of what parents are saying. And I certainly responded to the survey that our district put out, and overwhelmingly, like I said, the top 3 or 4 had to do with school safety. I don't know that any of that directly related to what the end result is, but it's very clear that that is number one on the minds of parents, certainly on the minds of myself as well. And one thing that I would say that I think that the town has done very, very well in having a local law enforcement office is that we've made ourselves known. We've also been recognizable. We've had great relationships with school district administrators, principals. They have our cell phone numbers, we have their cell phone numbers. And the kids, I believe, and I'll speak for my kids personally, they love seeing the same person or the same 2 people walk to schools, because then it's not scary. Then it's not, all the negative things that you would say about somebody who's walking into your school district legally carrying a firearm. A lot of that is dissuaded because that familiarity and that relationship that can be built, I think, is a very, very positive thing. Almost to a fault. My kids will walk right up to a police officer and want to touch their firearm, which is certainly dangerous. But I think that we solve things through relationships. And I truly believe that relationships are rocket ships, that we solve most of our problems through that relationship that we start to build. And I would say, as a parent, having a person or groups of people that are in a limited fashion, 1 or 2, 3 people, that you start to build that relationship with. Talk to any security personnel in a high school. Every single one of those security personnel that does their job really well, they know every single troubled kid by their first name. They know their address, they know their circumstance, and that relatability is what really gets you access, and I might even dare say authority, over students that might not otherwise respond well to authority. I've seen that personally, and I've seen them be able to diffuse situations simply because they've taken the time to establish that relationship with students.
Thank you very much, Supervisors. Joe or Brian, did you guys have any questions for Mike?
You were talking about funding.
Yes.
Right now, you're funding your SROs how?
We don't have any SRRs in our school district.
Okay.
We do, because we are a community that has a local police department. Not all communities have that. They certainly have access to the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. But because we have that, we've made that a point. I mean, the school district in any community is usually the organization with the largest employment. So it makes sense that we have a direct relationship, and that our officers are on call when the need arises. My point in saying that earlier is that we, at any one time, at most, only have 2 road patrol. And every single day when there is a challenge that escalates to the point that needs law enforcement, it takes one of our officers off the road for another emergency.
So right now, your officers are the security for your schools?
They have a school, the school has a security team for sure.
Okay.
But when it escalates to the point where it needs law enforcement, we do have to take one of our officers. And that's what we're there for. It's certainly not a complaint, but I do know that having many school districts have chosen SROs for that specific purpose, so that they're familiar with the district, that they can respond in the capacity of law enforcement officer.
So going back to one size don't fit all.
Correct.
We might want to fund the town in this case instead of the school district?
I think that when I was the intergovernmental relations chair in the county, what we did is we actually worked to pair intermunicipal agreements between the two. I don't think it's a one way, and I don't think that the town or the school, either one would say, well, we're the ones that want the money. What we want to say is, we see a need, we would like some help.
Exactly. Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Oh, yeah,
Mike, I do have a question.
sure.
If you were able to get the funding, and you being a town supervisor, having your own police force, if you got the funding, would you grow your police force, or would you go to an SRO?
If we got the funding and it was specifically designed to help out within the school district, it would go to the school, it would go to helping programs in the school district. And there's a whole bunch of different ways to go about that. We still have a DARE program where we're doing education pieces inside the district.
I don't mean so much of programs, I mean an individual, whether it's a police officer or a safety security officer, or in Wayne County we call them SROs.
Yep.
Would you move to an SRO?
Absolutely. Of course, the district would have to be in agreement with that, but 100%, because what that does is it not only provides them with additional level of security and authority, but it also alleviates the responsibility that we have to take one of our officers off the road whenever there is that level of emergency. And I will also say this, some people say, well, by having one SRO and you have 7 different buildings, I think it's more than that, for the school district, well, if they're in one elementary school and there's an incident in the other one, that doesn't help anything. But it's not really the point. If you have somebody that is familiar with the buildings, first of all, they know it like the back of their hand. It doesn't mean that the local office won't respond. It just means that there is a point person that has the active authority to do what needs to be done and then have us be there for backup. But 100%, if there was funding available and the district was willing to comply, that's exactly where it would go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor.
Thank you.
Sam. Next up, I'd like to invite from the Spencerport School District, which we're currently in, Superintendent Kristen Swan and Director of Security Chief Chris Mears. And on deck is going to be Chief Deputy Fowler.
Thank you, just grabbing my notes. So Mike had shared some of the efforts that we've undertaken even this past year to improve safety and security in our school district. So first, we do have a security department in our school district. We actually have retired Chief Mears as our new security director, and we're thrilled to have him. But we also contract with a security company for security staff around the clock in our buildings. That's incredibly important. As Supervisor Zale said, it's very important for students to know the people who are in their buildings, to build relationships and trust. And really, we feel the work to create safe schools starts well before an incident. So having appropriate security staffing, creating relationships with children, being proactive is really at the focus of our work. One area that wasn't shared, which I think is important to talk about, is what we can do for children in regards to their mental health needs as well. We have seen, and certainly with the impact of COVID, and this is a national trend, it's just not a Spencerport trend or a regional trend, children who are presenting with considerably more mental health needs. The impact of COVID, the impact of financial insecurity, food insecurity, and the stresses that brings into the school district. So what we don't have set up right now, in that we're trying to build, but it's very difficult and there's a barrier, are preventative health supports. So supports that we can partner with outside agencies to get students and families the supports that they need, because there's only so much that a school district could do. So the reality is we have students We understand their needs, we're working with their parents, but we need an avenue and a pipeline for preventative mental health care, and an avenue to partner our families with mental health supports. That would make a considerable difference in our schools in the day-to-day, and again, it would be proactive safety and security work.
Superintendent, talking about, you mentioned that the district is contracting with an outside vendor for those security services. When looking at the financial cost to the district for that and the human resources aspect of that, is it more difficult for the district to administer that third-party contract versus having district personnel provide that service right up front?
I think some of the difficulties or the barriers is the availability of staff as well. So we're an educational institution. We're not a security company. So to find appropriate security personnel and to build a security department for a public school district is difficult. We've have wonderful partners, and Chris has really contributed a great deal to the development of that support in our school district. But I'm not sure that all school districts could say that they have that level of support. And again, so finding appropriate personnel that can provide safety and security services, that understand children, that work in a proactive way, that understand a conflict cycle and what children need in the moment. Those are complex needs for a school district to try to put together.
Tony?
Let me ask the first question about your private security. That's 24/7? They're there 24/7?
Not 24/7, but we certainly have security in school hours all day, after school hours, but not completely 24/7.
How do you deal with the football games, the basketball games, those kind of things? They're around for that?
Yep.
All right. Secondly, one of the things we've heard a lot about is what you've just talked about, mental health. About what we've heard from other superintendents is that they're having problems finding people that are certified to actually fill those positions. And one of the things they have told us is that somehow we'd have to streamline the certification system from the Department of Ed or wherever to try to get these people back to get you the help you need, because it seems like we can't find enough counselors anywhere right now.
Right, so it's a two-pronged approach, I believe. What you're referencing are mental health providers in the school district, and you're right, it's very difficult to find enough certified staff to bring them into the school district. But in addition to that, we need to have a pipeline to refer families for mental health support outside of the school district as well. We embarked on a partnership with some regional hospitals, but they only have so much bandwidth. Those entities need to grow to fill the need that we're seeing in the public school district.
What's your relationship with the county? They also has those kind of services. Is there any pipeline between you guys and them, conduit, that says we have a problem with family X and we can't find them help? Can you find them help?
Right, we're working in conjunction with those resources all the time, but what we experience is just a limited bandwidth on their end. And so again, we know the children, we're working with the families, but we have to develop that pipeline to resources in the community.
One more. Currently, you're working with the not-for-profits then to help you, right? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So kind of piggybacking off that, and this is, I'm asking you the question, but this is for anybody who comes up after you. You look at the city school district, you look at some other suburban school districts, they've started to institute a community schools model in some of their more impoverished schools based on demographics. If the state funding model were to adapt to that community school type setting or services, would you see that as a way to accomplish some of that connecting of the pipeline between your student population, their families, and the supports that they may need for whatever may be happening outside of the school building and making learning a little bit easier?
those could be things that we start to research and try to move towards. Again, funding sources are imperative. You know, how we're going to create that, how we're going to pay for it and support our families, but also, again, how on the opposite end, we're going to have the certified personnel and the people who can manage this level of need.
Chris, just a question for you. As Director of Security, do you have any interaction with families directly?
Oh, absolutely. In cases where there might be a dispute or a problem between students, I've actually contacted a number of family members already. I've only been there for about a month now.
Wow, okay. Second question, in regards to families, do you see yourself or someone in security taking a more proactive approach with the families, not so much the students, but the family members, especially in our rural schools? Like the further east you go in my district, you know, there's just not the funding there to do what you guys can do here. Do you see more of an interaction between yourself and families directly saying, bring 10 families in and say, look, this is what's going on at the schools. These are some of our issues, our concerns. Do you see something like that being able to happen or work?
I can certainly see that, and I think I benefit a little bit from having worked in the
Sure.
community for so long that I have a little bit of trust in both ways from the community and coming towards the schools. Yeah, I definitely could see that with the backing of the superintendent and the board, bringing together groups of families to discuss some new approaches to safety and security, definitely.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite Chief Deputy Michael Fowler from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office to come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for allowing me to testify. I very much appreciate it, and this is certainly a topic that's well deserving of the attention, so I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to begin by stating that some of the previous topics that have been mentioned, and most specifically by the superintendent, you know, mental health is one of the biggest issues that's affecting almost every aspect of law enforcement's work right now. And it is one of the biggest shortages of resources. So whether we look at counselors, therapists being assigned to specific school districts or through a county model, a community model where they're available for all sorts of schools and businesses and the community itself, it's an area that absolutely needs more attention, more funding, and you know, a possibility to look at areas that maybe haven't been explored in the past, like working with schools for tuition reimbursement if they work for a certain number of years. Things like that, those models are all being talked about within our community that, geez, we really wish that those services were available, and whatever it takes to get the interest in that profession and be able to have those resources available at a much quicker opportunity is something that we would very much be interested in seeing. From the prevention and the intervention phase, you know, you look at school violence, that really needs to be the focus of the efforts, the prevention and the intervention so that it doesn't reach a stage of violence. We would hope that a community of students and staff members within a school could be a healthy environment, that they would have the resources they need to deal with conflict and to deal with struggles that all of these students are seeing right now, especially post-COVID. We're noticing those emotional difficulties when we have to get involved, and I'm sure the school sees it on a nonstop basis. But any effort that we can put towards prevention and intervention is really what we would like to see the focus of. And that's coming from law enforcement, who most notably deals in the response phase after the violence has actually occurred. We do have a new model here in Monroe County. We call it ROCTAC. It's our threat assessment model. It stands for Rochester Threat Assessment Committee. It is a group of several members. We have law enforcement, we have mental health workers, we have school administrators, we have school security members, we have local business security representative. All of us that have been trained in threat assessment come together and sit as a committee, and when a particular school or neighborhood or family has problems that have been identified and they begin to escalate out of control and we can't seem to get the right intervention in place, we'll bring that case before the committee. The committee is, as I stated, they are a group of professionals with all sorts of various backgrounds. So we get a lot of open conversation and ideas and things. For instance, we just went through a case where we had a local business security leader that offered a solution that very much helped intervene in a potential violent case. This model is, within its infancy right now. However, it's reached the national notoriety. We've got now have an executive order in New York State that every county in the state will look to implement something similar like this. We were the first here to get it started, and there's certainly room to grow. But that is a piece of intervention that we think is showing signs of success, and we'd like to expand it and make that opportunity available to others also. The other point I'd like to discuss is relationships with law enforcement. It's certainly something that's very important to us, and we hope that it's important to the schools and the school administrators. I can tell you that I'm here representing one of the larger police agencies, the second largest in Monroe County. So we don't quite have the same personal knowledge that the Spencerport School District can enjoy with their local police department, and certainly the benefit of having retired Chief Mears on staff is something that we wish every school could enjoy, right? So we struggle with relationships with law enforcement because we're a larger agency and we have a rotation of personnel. It's not always the same officers, deputies that are working in these schools. Anything we can do to build that relationship is a struggle for us. We still have schools in this area that do not want any involvement with law enforcement, even on a proactive, positive attitude type. Whether it's a mindset that it creates a negative image at the school or it gives parents the feeling that something must have been wrong. We're still working to try to break down that barrier, and it's difficult. I would love the opportunity. Those schools that the sheriff's office actually does work as their primary law enforcement jurisdiction, I would love the opportunity on an annual basis to be able to send a senior law enforcement member into the school, someone they know, someone they trust, to sit down with them and go through their emergency response plans and their prevention techniques and intervention. To go over their physical security measures. What types of procedures do they have in place for locks on their doors and who's getting access control, things like that. Just that annual refresher of a face-to-face, sit down and go through the plans. It allows us as a law enforcement agency to get more familiar with the school, more familiar with the administration. We can address concerns that we have at that meeting, refresh the floor plans, all those sort of things that we look for in a time of emergency. I can also add to that by saying that certainly every school is required to have their emergency response plans. I hope they're being updated, and I hope that we can present that positive face to be able to sit down at the table and share that review of those plans with them. It's no secret that almost every law enforcement agency, I'll say in Monroe County, is facing significant staffing issues, recruitment issues. It's certainly not a secret the trend is headed in the wrong direction. We hope that we can turn it around. We're trying all sorts of new things to do that. One of the reasons that I bring this up is because it has an effect on the school safety and security. So it is very difficult to continue forward with the DARE program in schools because of staffing issues. It is very difficult. I'm in a position right now as the chief deputy responsible for the entire police bureau that I have to make a decision between DARE or SROs. If that's the case, I certainly would prefer an SRO, but staffing has to come into consideration. Right now, any amount of money thrown at the problem won't solve that issue until people graduate from the police academy, which is 10 to 12 months away, depending on what time of the year we look at that. We can't just make additional police officers and sheriff's deputies appear. They have to go through that training and selection process. So that's an issue that we're facing right now, and it's a very difficult decision because it's one of the last things we want to do. But it's the nature of the beast at the moment because of the situation that we're dealing with and the increased violence in the community. I mentioned earlier concerns about access control. That is one of our biggest issues also. When an emergency takes place at one of our schools, you're going to get a multitude of police officers from all different jurisdictions responding to the school. How we get through those locked doors is a problem, and we absolutely want them to lock the doors. In time of emergency, that's a key component. Secure the facility. And we would love to see some common platform when it comes to the access control methods that are in place. We currently have several different school districts that we support in the county, and we have to carry access control cards for each different school. It makes it very difficult. If they could all be on one platform and we all work out a system where I provide a roster to them, they add us to their system and give us an access control card. The school always has the right to revoke it if they should choose, but we only have to carry one card that allows us into each of the schools.
Can I ask a quick question about
Sure.
the chief deputy? So thinking about school district, so you may have one municipality where you may have one deputy on covering that municipality during the day. Is it that access card right now being granted just to people to your deputies who cover that zone? Or is it to all your deputies who may just be serving just that municipality?
Right. Right now, it's to just those deputies that are in that specific area.
Okay.
Because the other deputies, you'd end up carrying 12 to 20 cards with you. And you pull up on scene and you're gonna have to go through the stack and figure out which one is which. The more we could get to a common platform for access control and for camera systems. Should we have to respond to a school wanting access to the camera feeds is gonna be an early request of ours. I can tell you that we're already flooded with technology. I don't want to have to do that myself. I would much rather have an employee from the school nearby that can bring it up and work through those cameras with us and just show us the feeds that we need to see. But if that were to fail and we needed access ourselves, we have to deal with 20 different camera systems, and I have to train people on 20 different systems, how to operate those and how to look through the footage to be able to use them to our advantage. So those areas of technology where we could get a common platform would certainly help. Those are the majority of my concerns that I felt necessary to bring forward today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm all set on the questions, Chief Deputy.
My first question is, when you were talking about prevention and intervention, how much of a deterrence model do we have from the sheriff's department when it comes to that kind of disruption at schools?
So specifically from the sheriff's department, we do not have very many SROs in those schools that we are the primary responding law enforcement agency. It's a budget issue, right? That's a tremendous cost for school districts, and we would have to hire that person and then seek the reimbursement through the school. So what we have are DARE deputies that are in some of the schools, and as I mentioned, we are reaching a decision point when it comes to that, and I imagine that within the next couple of months we will have to unfortunately bring those out and try to seek an alternative. What we will have is probably half as many deputies making rotations through the schools. Visit for a couple hours and then go to the next school and visit for a couple hours, as opposed to the former model where that DARE deputy may have spent several hours in the same school going through multiple classes. It is absolutely not the direction we want to go, but unfortunately, it's come down to the point that it's either that or not being able to put deputies in the patrol cars out in their districts.
Thank you very much, Chief
Thank
Deputy.
you.
Next, I'd like to invite, and if I butcher somebody's name, I apologize in advance. Karen Arthman from the Rush Henrietta Employees Association, Dwayne Serbone from Pittsford District Teachers Association, and Jason Valenti from the Rochester Teachers Association.
We thank you for the opportunity to share this evening with you and for your valuing the concept of looking at schools in this manner. I'm Dwayne Sabone. I'm president of the Pittsford District Teachers Association, a high school math teacher, and president of Monroe County Federation of Teachers. So just an honor to be with you. This summer we had the privilege of working on a task force through NYSET, Safe Schools Task Force, looking at very much the same topics that you're looking at. So I do believe that the entire findings of our group have been presented to you. If you have any need for them, please let us know. We'll be sure to make sure you have the links and the access.
We have contacted NYSET and got most of your information.
Beautiful.
And we'll hopefully continue to share it with them, or they'll share their information with us as we try to put together the proposals
Thank you.
that we're going to be doing. But
Working in tandem with that would be very important.
You did a lot of legwork on that. We knew we weren't going to reinvent the wheel with this, so we went to the different agencies and we, especially teachers, superintendents, the education components, to make sure that the research they've done, and you could tell when school systems started, when the school year started, every news story had something about what that specific school district was doing regarding security. So we're trying to get our hands on everything we can and then go through it and try to find, again, best practices. So thank you.
Appreciate that focus. One of the opportunities over the summer was to realize that we worked with colleagues across the state. So from Brookline to Albany and in our region, and just sitting here alone, that one-size-fits-all model is kind of demonstrated here. You'll see very different approaches in Rush Henrietta and in the city school district and in Pittsford. So we all have needs. We all have very similar needs, but our autonomy within our responses is going to be important through that. The concept of the partners has kind of come up through other conversations previously. That's really important. We're educators. We are experts on our content area. We're experts on child development, adolescent behaviors. We are not experts on security measures and responding to situations. So having those partnerships has been incredibly valuable to us. The concept around mental health, I'll speak about a little bit more. One of the concepts that we know is that students often have some perceived issue that they are working through, which leads to these mass violent situations. There's what we refer to as leakage. That's an opportunity for a student to be sharing some information that is accessible if we are perceptive and able to have systems in place to report and to address that. We've been working on that. In our schools, we put in a program that when students return from suspensions, that it's not a return back to the classroom directly, but there are programs to support them, both during their suspension and as they're on their return, so that there's a restorative practice, that you're not returning with the same harm perceived when you left as when you returned, because we know that that just breeds contempt and issues within the school system. One of the things that we look at is the concept of the staffing, and one of my colleagues will talk more about that. We talk a lot about what it takes to get more people certified. What sometimes we forget about is how do we keep the people we have? How do we retain the staff who are not looking for opportunity to retire and exit the system? And it's that concept of value and respect that is so often lost. Whether I see it among our brothers and sisters in the police department or through education, it's that concept of how do we build and support respect for those in the fields, that they're not looking for opportunities to move on. Because I can tell you within my classroom, I adore and love every moment with my students. It is those bigger concepts that you're struggling with in a community sense that sometimes make it hard to be an educator. Additionally, on top of that, I would talk about the challenges that we find between fire prevention and safety prevention. They are at conflict with each other. The same system that allows you to secure a door in order to be safe in the classroom is then banned through fire protocols. And those two conflicting measures, although valued, we do need somebody outside of our realms to help us understand how to balance those in a financially fiscal manner, or with the financial support necessary to do so. And the last aspect I think that I'll touch on is the concept of working with our students is our strength. We have that ability. We need the support through the mental health and through the security measures in order to provide that atmosphere. Because what we know is our students can't learn when they don't feel safe, and our teachers and our paras cannot function in an environment where they don't feel safe. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Karen Arthman. I worked for the Rush Henrietta School District for 37 years, 27 of them as a security guard. At Rush Henrietta, we're called youth assistants. It's user-friendly. It's not as scary to the kids. I was privileged to serve on the task force this summer with Dwayne and Jason and a lot of other people across the state. And NYSET wanted to be on the ground floor of determining what priorities are to keep our families safe, to keep our school families safe and our community families safe. Many of us who work in the school district also live in that community. I have 2 children who are grown, and I have 6 grandchildren who have also gone through the school district where I work. And I want to make sure that they and everyone else go home in the same condition that they came in the morning. Towards that end, Chief Deputy Fowler touched on a lot of things, and I would not presume to say anything that he didn't already talk about or think that I knew more than he did ever. I knew him when he worked out in a B-zone out in Henrietta. We didn't talk a lot about the cameras. We have cameras inside and outside of our building. We have 64 just inside, and we have cameras all the way around the building. We can always use more. They're not always as great as they should be. They always need to be maintained and upgraded, and every district, I believe, should have those cameras. I know there are grants available, and they should look at those if they don't have the affordability to do it on their own, because I know not everybody has access to a huge budget these days, even with the government help. We do have our own security staff in-house. I have 17 youth assistants. As I said, I'm president of paraprofessionals. The youth assistants fall under my jurisdiction. We have 17 in 10 different buildings. We have 7 at the high school. I also have a security supervisor who is a former Monroe County sheriff. So he brings his years of wisdom and expertise to us every day, and that's huge. We used to have SROs, and they were a great asset to our district. They built relationships with the kids. A lot of times the kids would go to them to tell them things that were going on. They never saw them as the enemy or somebody to be feared. We use them daily to help us in our job, and right now we don't have one, but the Monroe County Sheriffs do come through our building because they're right down the street from us. They come through the high school, and I think the other buildings also, on a regular basis, just to walk through, let the kids see who they are, and build those relationships. The staffing shortage is huge all over the state and all over the country. I travel through the American Federation of Teachers in NYSET from Oregon to Florida, and everybody's going through the same problems. There aren't the staff that we need. I don't know how people are living because people aren't working, and I don't know how that works because I'd like to sign up for that. But we just need more staff all the time. It's hard to get good people. It's hard to have someone come in and, as the superintendent said, a lot of times people don't know how to work with kids. It's different when you come in as a security person. That's why we have in-house security, because, like I said, we live in the community. We know our kids. We know each other's kids. It's hard. We had a outside security firm for a while. I think it was after Columbine. We had Intrepid, and they came, but they were more outside. They weren't there during the day, but they don't have the same relationship, and it's huge to have relationships with your kids and the staff. So that's one thing that's a best practice, if you can do that. A couple of things that weren't mentioned. You need doors that lock from the inside with a push button. If there's an intruder, you need to get your kids inside and hidden, and you need to be able to lock the door immediately. You can't fumble around for keys. That's a big problem, and everybody does not have that. We've got them on most of our doors now. You need only one entrance and one exit during the day when you have your kids. You make sure that all the doors are locked throughout the day, and they're all checked frequently. You need things maintained. The facilities need to be maintained and updated, as well as the cameras. Like I said, you can never have enough cameras, so those need to continue to be enhanced. We need training that's relevant to our jobs. We're not Monroe County Sheriffs. The training we get has a lot to do with being a sheriff. We have yearly training. We have an 8-hour training, we have a 16-hour training, and then we have yearly 8-hour trainings. But we need more training that's relevant to school security. And I don't know if that's something we can do through legislation, or we can do it just through the legislators themselves, if there's something we can work with you on to set up appropriate training. 3 things that are not costly, but they're very important, are transparency, communication, and building those relationships that we talked about. I don't think there's enough transparency in any of the districts. It seems like everybody's really concerned about people's privacy, which is great, but if you don't know what's going on with a child, it's hard to deal with them. And I've been the recipient of someone telling me off and me telling them, well, that looks like a referral, and finding out they just came back from 4 years in lockdown and they're probably not real concerned about getting a referral. But that puts us in jeopardy when we don't know that kind of thing. So I would like to see more transparency, and communication is always huge, and that's true in any district. You need to be able to have open door policies with your superintendents and any directors that you have in your district, and I would like to see that encouraged. The all-access cards sound good, but I don't know how that would work. I don't know how you do that from all the districts on one card. But I can understand totally why it would be a great idea, because you don't want to be fumbling around for the right card for that school. And we do have the access card with the Monroe County Sheriffs. So basically, that's all I want to say. We need help. We need support. We need all kinds of staffing. And I don't know the answer to that because nobody has the answer right now. But certainly if you have any ideas that we could run with, or we could bring them to you if we have any, that would be helpful. I thank you for your time and your support.
Hello, Assemblyman. Jason Valenti. I'm a 5th grade teacher. This is my 26th year in a classroom. 20 of the years have been here in Rochester, but just to give you a little background, I grew up in Waterloo. Most of my family's still there, and in Seneca Falls. My grandparents are from Ogdensburg, and I think I spent most of my life between 390 and 81. Went to school in Geneseo. I've had the opportunity in the last few years to work a lot more with NYSA, and being a member of the RTA as one of the bigger unions, I get sent out to a lot of stuff. A lot of what I hear tonight is, you know, we need money, we need this, and there's not, some places there's not money to spend it on, anything to spend it on. We have a shortage in mental health. We have a shortage in people that want to be police officers. We have a shortage in people that want to be teachers. And I think a lot of what we're hearing is the short-term solution. I mean, we got to make sure there's doors that lock. We have to make sure there is response time and plans. But I think we're all here because one thing that we talked a lot about in our conference was the school shootings. I mean, that really brought everything to the forefront. And in 20 years in Rochester, I'll be honest with you, I've seen a lot of violence that added up over the years has exceeded the school shootings we're seeing in dribs and drabs. And I think that in the long-term approach, it really is mental health. A lot of these things, when you hear about somebody in the city with a shooting, or you hear about someone and one of these mass shooters, you can go back to their elementary school teachers. You could go back to the people that knew them when they were younger. There's always a trail that goes back, the Monday morning quarterback. If only we had done something different. I see a need for this. We all know that schools have changed in the last 20 years. Education is what they are for. But in the last 20 years, that has not become the sole focus. every year, more and more, we are dealing with the emotional needs, the physical needs, the food, the clothing, the after-school program. With the community schools, you got the physical health wraparound with doctors. Yet there's still that onus, that focus on education. And I'm not saying that shouldn't be part of it. But you're looking at schools, at least in the city, and I know my friends in Waterloo and a couple of the other the rural schools, they're all worried about receivership. They're all worried about this punishment. And as Karen pointed out with the transparency, districts hide things. They hide assaults at elementary school. They hide them at upper schools. They don't want people to know that some third grader lost their mind and threw a chair and hurt the teacher's leg. That, that's all right, take a couple of days. These things aren't being brought up because we're not supposed to suspend kids. You suspend too many kids, all of a sudden, the Department of Education wants to put you in receivership. They want to come down on your district. How come you have all these problems? We don't so much need, I think, sometimes more money. We just need the ability to put our resources that we have where they need to be. We've got people in my building that could be used as counselors, that could be used to work with kids, but we're so worried that we're not going to hit some 5-point increase on some ELA tests for third graders through sixth graders, which is important, but this is a test. Some of these kids, their lives are messed up, not just in Waterloo or in Brooklyn, but right here or in Waterloo. I mean, rural poverty is a real thing. I grew up seeing it, and I still see it. It's more spread out. It isn't as concentrated. There isn't a corner for the violence to occur on. We need to be able to focus in schools on what's most important. And really what's most important is safety. Yeah, we need to educate the kids, and they need to learn. We need to be able to increase our STEM graduates. We need to be able to compete in the world out there today. But if a kid doesn't feel safe in school, if a kid doesn't feel valued, if he doesn't feel like his life or her life is worth going on with in a positive manner, you're not going to be able to get that education. You're not going to be able to deliver that message. So the Department of Education, I think, is still kind of stuck in not truly recognizing how much more goes on in schools, because the rules are set up to force us to hide things. And I'm not saying me. I like to yell from the rooftops these things are going on. But when you're a classroom teacher, really, you got 4 walls you yell at. It's the administration, it's the principals, it's the districts. And I'm not saying every district does it. I'm sure that some places are just, utopia. But I'd bet $1 to donuts that there are people out there in every district that says, really, I don't want that getting out there. Let's deal with it this way. And it's because of a fear from the negative, the stigma, or what's coming from the state. And, through our task force, we know we do need money for the counselors. We need that positive, people wanting to go into it, to help out kids, to go into teaching, to help out kids. So I think that Cuomo did some real damage with the way he talked about teachers and education in general. I think it really put a stymie on us. And I think we're going to be recovering for it from years. COVID just brought it all to the forefront. And at this time, I don't know. I guess I'm just asking is, through your influence with the Board of Education, help us help our kids. Help us make the place safer. And help us to do our jobs with children, which is keep them healthy, keep them happy, and help them to learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your viewpoint. Just want to touch on a couple of things that you said, Jason, and just ask a question back. And you talked about somebody throwing a chair at an educator. And I think, especially in our community, and you look at the city school district, there has been some attention on some of the violence, not external violence coming into the learning environment, but from students directed towards educators. What should districts, what should law enforcement, what should the state be doing to try to help, not disincentivize, because we're not incentivizing it, but to limit or end that type of student on educator violence?
I wish I had that answer. I mean, I feel like I'm on deja vu sometimes. I go to these meetings and they ask the questions. I'm like, we were working on this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
If it was an easy answer, I think anybody would have it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things that happens is when these incidents happen, we know that hurt children hurt others. They hurt people. And sometimes it isn't so much the intention that the chair is gonna be at the adult, it's just that there's this lashing out. And really, I think that there isn't enough time in our day for play at elementary schools. When you look at the schedules, I mean, we're mandated to have like, and I know it sounds like a little bit, but 60 minutes of this, 60 minutes of that. They end up getting half an hour for lunch, half an hour for gym every 2 days, and depending on your district, anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes a day of recess. And they try to fit in your social emotional learning between 9 and 9:20 when the kids come in, and they're all not even in the room until 9:10 and they're eating breakfast. And then English starts at 9:20. So that's the kind of stuff that the state has mandates for education, and that's what it should do with the board. That we need to have that from the Department of Education. I don't know if there's a way to disincentivize the third grade kid who does something like that, or other kids, because there is a lot of damage in many districts. But I think what you can do is you can give them other avenues to express, or to just get it out of their system. Kids are incredibly resilient. They really are. But I think sometimes the pressures that are put on the adults in the buildings about these scores are pushed down on the kids. I mean, even now, you're hearing about it, in all the different schools. I heard the state didn't come out with their scores yet because who knows why, really. I heard that the way they grade those tests is sort of a way that they get the fixed results that they want. And I hate referring to it as the state when I recognize you guys are assemblymen, but I don't know.
Sorry, we're in the minority. We get to blame a lot of things.
Yeah, right.
So that's all right.
They're across the
But
street.
I think it's more really the Department of Education, or the in New York State.
You mean state ed?
State ed, yeah. I get my terms a little confused. They
I got
keep
you.
they keep changing terms as they go. New York State has a great education system, and that's why I didn't wear my uniform tonight. I wore the one I wore to school, and I wear this occasionally just so the kids know. I'm like, hey, we're here for you. And they're little, they're 10, but they still like teachers and they still like school. But our task force over the summer looked at stuff about the violence, and we knew that we needed to deal with the nuts and bolts, the doors, the windows, the response times, the counselors. The mental health was one of the biggest things. And you break it down to elementary school. That's where it all starts. And for a kid who does something like that, I mean, it all comes sometimes with what happened. If nobody's really hurt, you can move on. Usually kids feel bad. But you watch for a pattern. And sometimes schools are afraid to even document that happened because they don't want that pattern. And they don't want to stigmatize the kid. But who gets hurt on that?
If I could respond to that, as far as what we could do with the government, we can stop punishing districts for telling the truth. Because there are Veda reports, but districts lie. Because you can't have too many incidents of violence or drugs or weapons, or you get penalized. And that's wrong. We are never going to fix anything as long as everything is shoved under the rug. And districts, frankly, are scared to report them.
Karen, just really quick on that. Is that why a lot of the school districts don't report bullying or deal with it as much?
Don't report, I'm sorry.
Is that, excuse me, is that one of the reasons why a lot of the schools aren't dealing with the bullying?
I
There's
believe
a
so.
lot of bullying that goes on that's never heard of, never reported. And as a parent that had 2 children go through bullying and absolutely nothing was done, it just turns my stomach that, first of all, the schools are gonna get punished because they're reporting it. Secondly, we're not dealing with the issue.
Exactly, both.
God bless you all, because I would not want to be in your shoes.
We know for a fact that every day there are weapons and drugs in every school probably in the state. Because it's just a fact of life right now. Where the kids are bringing the weapons because they don't feel safe walking to the bus stop, or they intend to come into school and do somebody harm. There are weapons, and you are not gonna find that out because the schools are scared to tell you.
So just another quick question, and for Dwayne and Jason, this is geared more towards you, but certainly your expertise, Karen. Are teachers getting enough training on what to do in the event of an outside threat?
There's definitely training going on as far as what you can do, and it's going to depend on the school district. It's going to depend on their capacity, and they're partnering with other agencies who actually know the answers to that. Part of the problem is that there are no standardized responses. You talk to two agencies that are focused on that type of safety measure, you'll get at least 3 different answers regarding what you should do, down to simply of lights on, lights off, blinds open, blinds closed, kids in this corner, kids on the floor. It's hard to get a standard answer. Now, I'm gonna say the reason for that is every situation is unique.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you have to rely on people's professional behavior in those scenarios. You have to give them the tools, and then within that, you have to allow them to not be second guessed. That armchair quarterback aspect is always gonna happen, and what I know about my colleagues is, looking back, we're always gonna be wrong. But because nothing goes ideally in those situations, but there is training going on, not
Is it-
enough.
Is that something, going back to what the chief deputy was talking about with ROCTAC, and now that there's an executive order that every county has to have this set up, would it be beneficial that if that became statute, that part of that provision of that type of group was to conduct the training for that emergency response for the school districts within that county?
Definitely, the ROCTAC connection has been tremendous. I've already seen and heard people coming back from those meetings with positive engagement, but that universal look at it would be very helpful.
Okay.
Regarding the concept of also what do we do around the safety aspect, it's partnering. You have to have the right people at the table. You cannot have a single administrator, a single parent, or a community group guiding how we respond to these scenarios in schools. You need all the players at the table. To have a conversation about what's happening in safety in your schools and not have a paraprofessional who's the one in the hallway dealing with that, not at the table, you're never going to get to the right response in that scenario. Too often, we have big conversations with the wrong people at the table.
I just have 2 quick comments. We battled against teaching to the test the whole time Cuomo was doing it, just so you guys weren't alone on that one. We thought that was a mistake, and we believe in local control.
Thank you.
That's simple. And even when it comes somewhat to security, again, the individual teams that are forming in these counties seem to be working better than anything we can do from on high at the state. Secondly, we are well aware that public service has fallen to the bottom of the list on people looking for professions. You look into our law enforcement, you look into what's going on there, you look at our teachers, like you said, a lot of math teachers especially are leaving to go to the private sector to make a lot more money. How much that has to do with security, again, I'm not sure, but we're looking at the real world out here and what's going on. Part of the problem with students is not that they're good or bad, it's that how much information can you share regarding their lives with the rest of the world? Especially when somebody goes out for help, there's HIPAA considerations all over the place telling us we can't find out more, because a lot of time when law enforcement refers somebody and they come back to the school, law enforcement don't know the result of that referral. So the information sharing isn't automatic, and it's difficult. People's rights have to be protected, and their family rights have to be protected. So what you have is the gaps that you guys are identifying, and there really isn't a solution to those gaps currently the way we're structured. So what you get from on high from Ed, what you get from on high from other places, the brain drain in New York is Department of Ed has lost a ton of people. If you look, just getting paperwork through those guys is almost impossible, let alone real information. It's the same in corrections in this state. You can't get enough correction officers. DEC has lost all their people. DOT has lost their engineers. We're bankrupt. We can't get plow drivers anymore. You can drive down any road and go by one of the residencies and see they're advertising for people that drive plows in the winter, and every town and village is doing the same thing. So yeah, we're in a crisis level here. We realize that. How do we improve it? I don't know. I mean, there was a lot of damage done over the years because public service was belittled instead of held on high. So I see that as a real problem. But I think, again, if we work together, we can get there. But right now, our priority is to keep you and those schools safe.
I want to thank you for that. That concept of that staffing model, one of the cleanest ways that we're going to be keeping schools safe is that we're not going to have bus drivers to get the students to the buildings. That's a sad reality. But right now, many of our buildings are very close. We have daily runs not going, kids not coming to school because we don't have a bus to pick them up.
Are you aware that the Buffalo School District has put together a plan to pay the parents to drop those kids off, to reimburse them for their expenses because they can't get enough bus drivers?
That concept of addressing the certification process for bus drivers, I believe, is at the state level. And that process, whether it be through the certification of CDL licensing overall, because that goes into all the areas that you were addressing, but specifically for bus drivers, it will not matter if we have electric buses when they're sitting in a parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite Eamon Scanlon, Education Policy Director for the Children's Agenda, to come up.
All right. Everybody's off the cuff. I feel very traditional and old, but, and I want to echo, can you hear me? I want to echo some of the things that were said previously about mental health and really being preventative in strategies. I think that's the most important piece here when we're talking about school safety. And I'll talk about a few specific policy proposals. If you're not familiar with the Children's Agenda, we're a small nonprofit located here in Rochester, New York, and we focus really on policy advocacy. So I'm looking at this more as a policy analyst and what really works best for kids. We don't take any government money or run any programs, so we're completely independent in our analysis. And we also really focus on, children from birth to career, and we're committed particularly to children who are the most vulnerable because of poverty, racism, health inequities, and trauma. Last week, we released a report titled Solutions Not Suspensions, and that lays out the case for reducing exclusionary discipline in schools and childcare settings. And there's a bill by the same name, Solutions Not Suspensions, that will be reintroduced in the 2023 legislative session, which puts needed guardrails on the use of suspension and expulsion in schools. And one thing we'd like to ask is for your support for that bill in the next legislative session. And suspensions and expulsions are a public safety issue. A study found that a student's chance of being arrested increases 2.1 times in the month after being suspended or expelled, and compared to the rest of the school year. And the overuse of exclusionary discipline is really fueling the school-to-prison pipeline. And unfortunately, the presence of police reinforces these practices rather than mitigates them. Now, to be clear, there are many police officers who have established trusting relationships with youth and acted heroically in responding to violent incidents. Unfortunately, there is evidence that the permanent presence of armed police may be more harmful than beneficial within a school setting. In June of 2020, the Children's Agenda submitted a letter to the Rochester City Council. It was co-signed by dozens of community organizations, faith leaders, and prominent individuals in Rochester supporting the end of armed police officers in the Rochester City School District. And with that broad community support, the contract between the Rochester Police Department and the Rochester City School District was ended in June of 2020. If RCSD, the abbreviation for the Rochester City School District, can have safe schools without police, we believe all districts in Monroe County can. And that same month, back in June of 2020, when the contract was ended, a 10-year-old was put in handcuffs during a routine traffic stop on Route 104. This is an example of how the presence of armed police may unintentionally lead to the criminalization of youth for normal adolescent behavior, especially children of color. When police were stationed at RCSD, we have incident reports detailing the use of pepper spray on students in crowded hallways, and we know of incidents of students as young as 7 years old being let out of school buildings in handcuffs in Monroe County. From a research perspective, there is no consensus on if the presence of police in schools make them any safer, and in fact, there are some studies to suggest the exact opposite, with higher rates of violent incidents and suspensions. One study, published in the Journal of Policy Analysis and Management by Dr. Emily K. Weisburst from UCLA, showed that grants to hire more police officers in Texas high schools and middle schools were associated with 6% higher rates of discipline, 2.5% decrease in graduation rates, and a 4.5% decrease in college enrollment compared to similar students at schools that did not hire more police officers. But what about rare active shooter scenarios that every parent dreads? And this is, of course, I think one of the main calls for this and what we're really concerned about. The FBI did a study of active shooter incidents between 2010 and 2013, and they found that for the incidents where they could figure out some sort of timeline of how long it happened, there 70% were over within 5 minutes. And even when law enforcement were present and able to respond within minutes, civilians were often faced with life or death decisions. Infamously, in Uvalde, Texas, and before that in Parkland, Florida, armed police were present during school shootings, but did not immediately engage with the active shooter. So all of this is just to say that when we look at policy solutions to make schools safe, police are not a panacea. They do not simply fix or necessarily, in all instances, make schools safe, and we don't have clear evidence that they make schools safe. And that is, with all due respect to the great heroic service of all the police officers in our community, but I would ask you to look at other possible policy interventions. And I know it's a tough crowd for this, but I thought I'd bring the studies anyway. So supporting some of the things that were mentioned before, mental health certainly is a very important intervention. And to have some more stable funding at the state and local level for that, one thing we can do is have an amendment to our Medicaid state plan. So currently, school districts cannot get reimbursed for services, health services to Medicaid for any student who doesn't have an individualized education plan or a disability. So in some of those very high poverty districts, rural, urban, or suburban, we could, if we pass this state plan amendment to the feds, reimburse for mental health preventative services through Medicaid. So it wouldn't even cost the state additional money. That's free money on the table. The state just has to take action to initiate that. And the federal government is very encouraging of this. It's a bit of a wonky, small issue, but it's one of those ways that we can start to provide stable funding in a long-term way to get preventative mental health services into schools. As I talked before about the report that we recently put out, Solutions Not Suspensions, there's a number of key components of that bill. And so reducing exclusionary discipline, again, it is a very key issue to doing some of the things that some of the teachers and superintendents talked about creating a welcoming environment within schools, a restorative environment within schools. You have to move away as much as possible from exclusionary discipline because the research is very clear. When a student misses that class time, they fall behind in their coursework, they become more alienated from school, they are more likely to fail their coursework, drop out of school, and then end up incarcerated or interacting with law enforcement down the line. That again is what we call the school to prison pipeline. So one thing we can do, and part of the Solutions Not Suspensions bill, would be to really restrict the use of suspensions for our youngest students. In the report, we showed that there were 51 suspensions in pre-K handed out in the Buffalo Public School District last school year. This happens for students as young as 3 years old. So we need to put really strong guardrails from ages 3 through 3rd grade, right? From that pre-K to 3rd grade continuum. Because like was mentioned before, a lot of these things start that early. That's when a kid becomes alienated. That's when a kid starts to get off track and isn't being supported. So kicking a kid out is not a solution to them acting out. Like was said before, hurt kids, hurt people, right? And so what are we doing? What are the interventions? And so part of this bill would also promote restorative practices, counseling. What are some of the things that we can fund on the preventative side? Because kicking kids out is not a solution. It's a temporary relief valve. Another element of the bill would be to put a cap on the total number of days a student can be suspended. Right now, there is no cap. For a single incident, you can be expelled for an entire school year. That's 180 days. We'd like to put that down to 20 days. And again, we'd like school districts to not suspend for minor incidents. to find solutions in those minor places where we can intervene and find a way to get that kid back on track rather than alienating them from the school and putting them off track in terms of their academic work. So those were the main points I wanted to make, and I want to echo again some of the other comments that were made. I think there's a lot of agreement here, and this is a really good charge, I think, to find ways that we can make schools safe. I just want to caution that the use of armed police, for all the years that we've had them within schools, and despite the anecdotal incidents where they build strong relationships with individual students, we don't have a research base to say that's effective in terms of making schools safer. And if that's why we're here today, we have to say, well, what is the best use of our dollars? Because it is expensive. You know, police officers are paid well. Could we be putting that money into mental health supports? Could we be going to the feds through an amendment to our Medicaid state plan? Could we be finding ways to support schools and having those mental health supports for the long term? So those are my remarks.
Thank you, Eamon. Joe?
Oh, thank you, that's very good.
Brian?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Thank you.
Next up, I'd like to invite Casey Kasorik, Superintendent of the Hilton Central School District and President of the Monroe County Superintendents Association.
Well, good evening, and thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to share the perspective of the Monroe County Association of School Superintendents, and then also representing the Hilton community. So I've been an educator for 27 years. I'm entering to my 12th year as a school superintendent. I was a teacher, a coach, assistant principal, superintendent in a small school district in Genesee County by the name of Byron Burgeon, and now superintendent here at Hilton for the last 7 years. I think we need to be very thoughtful with the approach that we take with safety. We've heard a lot of really good ideas tonight. We all agree that mental health is at the base of being proactive and keeping people safe and healthy so that we don't have to then deal with the violence. I would caution eliminating all tools as far as consequences for students. I certainly agree that we want to eliminate disconnecting with students at an early age with suspensions. But I will tell you that today we had a 7th grader in our school with a stun gun. So as a parent of students in that school, I have a sophomore daughter, I have an 8th grade son, and I have a 6th grade son. And we talked about students being bullied. I think we do need to base ourselves in the research, and we do have to be thoughtful about what we do. But I would also caution about moving all into one direction. I think we've experienced some of that with bail reform. And I do not want to compare student safety and student consequences to that, but I think you can possibly see a parallel. And I certainly want to make sure that I make the point that students need all the supports possible. I think it is important for our students to build relationships with school resource officers. I do think that school resource officers can be an added help to us. In Genesee County, different demographic, but I will tell you that we were one of the first schools to implement a Genesee County sheriff as an SRO. And it really comes down, like everything in life, if you have the right person in the right job, they're going to do a very good thing for kids. And what we saw is a very proactive relationship that led to kids making good decisions. I think the key here is school resource officers are not student disciplinary. We have assistant principals and principals to carry out managing that student, supporting them with mental health, with the counselors, giving consequences. When an SRO is implemented properly, they're a resource to the students. They're not a disciplinarian. They're not handing out consequences. And we found in our time anecdotally in Byron Burgeon the number of violent acts we were able to prevent because students had trust and they were willing to say, I want to let you know what's possibly going to go down or what has happened. I just think we need to consider that. I appreciate the research. I've also read the research. A few things that we've been able to do in Hilton that I think are important that potentially you could share with others is we use an app called the Navigate app. And the Navigate app, one of the things, now we're looking at not being proactive here, we're looking at reacting now. And I think one of the things that, as NYSET spoke today, I think it's important that we do entrust teachers to make judgments on safety. And I know they want to focus on content and teaching, but I give you the example of someone teaching a class in a high school and maybe someone walking across the football field with a firearm. In district office, I can't make the call on whether the school should be on lockdown until it can be reported. So the Navigate app that we've used for the last 4 years at Hilton allows every single staff member, and this is a big responsibility, the ability to lock down their school building. They don't have to call their principal, they can lock it down immediately. So it allows you to react in a situation quicker. Another thing that we're working towards that I know that you're very aware of is the lockdown and 911 button. So being an administrator or a greeter in a building, being able to react immediately, hit a button that then for us would go to Monroe County Sheriff and then also put our building into lockdown immediately is a tool that can be very important in a reactionary way. As Spencerport has begun to benefit, and we have benefited from for some time now, we were able to hire Captain David Inzana after he retired from the Monroe County Sheriff's Department to lead our security, and he's led us to a pipeline of retired law enforcement. Retired law enforcement can be a great addition to schools. They would not be carrying a firearm, so for individuals who are concerned about that, but what they do is they bring their great expertise. So we've been able to hire retired law enforcement as our security and build our security team out with retired law enforcement. I think the key there is the fact that we have to go through a waiver process every year to bring. So right now, if we're capping what an individual can make with a pension to $35,000, that's problematic. And it's not problematic because people are looking to double dip or be greedy. You're talking about a skill set that has been developed over years that is different than other skill set. And if we can move past that cap and not have that waiver, we will be able to bring individuals in to work in our schools, and that may alleviate the staffing issue of not being able to find school resource officers. So I do share the thoughts with everyone tonight. I think everyone has made a great point on security and safety, but I think the few points that I made, which are reactive because we've always already acknowledged the importance of mental health, are some things that we could work together with legislation to help improve. So that would be the utilization of retired law enforcement in school districts. And I do think there's autonomy for each community. Whatever the community's acceptances of those opportunities are important. I will tell you, we welcome Monroe County Sheriff to Hilton Central School District. They have coordinated with our Director of Safety and Security as a retired Monroe County captain to conduct drills and know the floor plans of our buildings. We also welcome the K-9 into our buildings to train and also during the day. That helps us with other situations that may lead to violence in our schools as well. So those are some things. I know some of those can be controversial, but we have found those to be positive for our community.
Thank you, Superintendent.
We've had bills to lift the ceiling on earnings. They haven't got out of committee. The fact that you're getting 211 waivers is a positive anyways, but we're still trying that because, again, the idea of a 211 waiver is the skill set. And you don't get that skill set unless you dedicated your life to your former profession. So we're aware of that, and that's something we've been working on.
Absolutely. And for example, some of our other colleagues who have presented this evening, we deal with civil service. So the hourly wage at civil service may be different than being able to pay $25 an hour for retired law enforcement. So being able to work through some of those things, as you mentioned, and I appreciate very much your efforts to do that, because I do think that will help. A lot of our retired law enforcement, they like to do other things. They've retired for a reason. They want to be able to see their grandchildren or their families or hunt and fish. So if we can build a stable of individuals who are willing to work per diem, I think we can address some of that within the cap.
And we need some flexibility within that system, and we're working on it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Superintendent.
Thank you very much.
Next, I'd like to invite Sheriff Robert Milby of Wayne County.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just wanted to make sure Brian could get home safely tonight, so I didn't want to make you guys wait too long.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you. With me is a real-life SRO, Brian Steinruck. He works at our BOCES campus in Williamson. And what I'd like to start out by saying is I want to echo the sentiments of Chief Deputy Fowler, when he talks about the lack of membership and the enrollment in the law enforcement career. We're feeling the effects of that in Wayne County as well. But what we do have in Wayne County, and I'm trying desperately to hold on to, is an SRO program. And I am here to support that SRO program, to let you know that it's working in Wayne County. We currently have 11 spots. I have requests for 3 more. And we have seen with the 11 spots that we have SROs in, we've seen requests to go from 10 months to 12 months throughout the year. This is how much they value this program. So if there's anything that can be done through the assembly to incentivize SROs within our school districts, I would strongly support that and stand behind that. I always go back to what I like to say is why would we wait for a tragedy to happen before we prepare for a tragedy to happen? Why not equip our schools with those safety and security measures in place that our SROs will provide? Some of the comments that I heard earlier about inconsistencies among officers within the schools, the New York State Sheriff's Association has come out with standardization of the SRO program. It's called CPAS, and you can find that online. What it does is it's standardized training for your SROs. That includes mental health training. It includes security awareness, and it includes those things that have been talked about tonight. But I would also caution that these grants that I'm suggesting be for local law enforcement, not for statewide law enforcement, but for local law enforcement. And the reason that I say local law enforcement is because these officers grow up there, they live there, they know the people that they're serving, they know the families that are in need, they know the families they're serving, they know these buildings. So there's some advantage to having our local law enforcement as SROs. What our SROs have done is they've also become part of threat assessment teams within the schools. And what that does is it brings our county stakeholders to the table. And we talk about problematic children. We talk about children that are in need. And we talk about children that would benefit from some of these services. And by having law enforcement in that helps us with any further investigations that we may be included in. It helps us with the knowledge of the families that we serve, the areas that we serve. I mean, I could go on and on about the benefits of our SROs. We've not had one school drop the SROs since we started the program. We just continually have requests for more. We have superintendents that have a desire to put one in every building. There's something to be said. I've seen it myself. When I've sat in an SRO's office just for a routine visit, and a student entered that room and said, "Sorry to bother you, sir, but this was a problematic child who was known for fighting consistently in the school." And she said to him, "I was gonna beat her ass, but I remembered our conversation, so I came to talk to you first." To me, that was worth the whole program. And I'm sorry if I appear a little bit emotional about this, but there's nothing more valuable than our kids and reaching our kids. In this country, we created a culture of character assassination of the police, of rhetoric, defunding the police. We're not seeing that in Wayne County. We're seeing a turnaround. I've never seen more people reach out and tell us how much they appreciate their law enforcement. We created this problem in America, our relationships with police. I believe that starting with children early, with those mentoring relationships by our police officers, are the way to turn that around. I've seen it firsthand myself. And Deputy Steinruck and I will be here to answer those questions for you as people who do have an SRO program, and would encourage you to support any school districts in this area that are looking for one.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. Certainly I'm more familiar with the operations of the Monroe County Sheriff's Department rather than Wayne, and not knowing the operations. If there's an incident at one of the schools, are there any local police forces within Wayne County that cover municipalities, or do you cover the entire county?
We do cover the entire county, but we do have municipal, police departments. And what we do with our SROs and our municipalities is we all train together. We actually have a director of safety and security at PALMAC sitting in this room right now who can tell you that we all do train together. We're always on the same page. The other thing that we do in Wayne County is we will have open forums with our school districts so that the teachers can come in and ask us questions. So that there's that open line of communication between law enforcement and school officials. But yes, we all train together so that we are all on the same page. And actually, some of those districts do have SROs themselves. The Palmac School District does have SROs that we do not provide.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
The question I had, and I should have brought it up with Chief Fowler also, dedicated funding. As we talk about school security and all those things, do you believe that maybe a revenue line would be sufficient with dedicated funding, like lockbox, similar to Stop DWI, where those fine returns came back to the county of origin, and that money was supposed to be used for the DWI program within the 7 or 8 components of that program? Would something of a dedicated fund of a lockbox, if we picked whatever revenue source for it, would that help you guys plan better for the future?
Can you give me an example?
Well, what I'm thinking about is, say, when we did DWI, the first thing they did was they increased patrols because by that point there was no deterrent to DWI. It was there for the grace of God go I, and it was an allowable offense. Okay? What they did with that, and that was back in the early 80s, is they took the fine returns, and the county that generated the fine returns, after it passed through the state of New York, those fine returns were then sent back to whoever was running the Stop DWI program. So then they could plan yearly on how much money they might be getting back so that they could provide a dedicated DWI patrol. Lots of departments did that. So my point is, if we could find a way to find a part of a dedicated revenue source that would go into school safety and security that could help you plan in the future, you and the Monroe County Sheriff's Department, all of us, would that be beneficial?
Absolutely. Any efforts that can be made to join the police in their communities is well worth the investment.
Well, the way we're looking at it right now, and it's a huge subject, guys. It's not particular just to the police. It's for the whole safety and security of this thing.
Yes.
I mean, including one of the arguments we've had is capital improvements, and I should have asked the superintendent this one. Capital improvements to make the target harder and stuff like that. And if we don't want that in the regular budget where their state aid is involved, because that reimbursement changes year to year, it should be the same for law enforcement and for everybody else, mental health, everything that goes part of what we're talking about, school safety security. You would have a revenue source that you would know you could go to help you succeed doing this. And I just use DWI as an example because that was done in the early 80s, actually. Smith Connolly was the name of the bill. I'm just curious, if we didn't, because everything we've talked about today has come back to revenue, everything.
That's right.
You know, and at some point, how do we answer that question of the revenue situation? We do need more mental health. We do need a hardening of our targets. We do need to deal with school safety and security. But everything I've heard tonight, and I've heard it everyone we've been to, is pretty much we need more money. And where do we find that more money? On an income, especially in a state budget that was out of control this year, and that money from COVID is not going to come next year. So the fact of the matter is, we're probably going to have more of a problem. So I don't want money to be the issue on school safety and security. So that's why I asked the question, and I should have asked everybody the question. Does a dedicated force of funding that you could apply to help you out more than the way we're doing it now?
So I will say, Joe, that there is a phenomenal piece of legislation called the Guardians of School program that would create a Guardians of School license plate where all the purchase of that license plate would go directly to school districts, and I believe the sponsor is Assemblyman Josh Jensen. So that's a terrific bill that I think we should focus on.
How could I miss that?
Yeah, thanks for laying up the softball there, Joe.
Anytime.
No, sir, I can't say that I disagree with you at all. I believe that, you know, again, I have to reiterate, anything that we can do in order to put the SROs in our schools would benefit our children, not only now, but for many years to come.
And one more question. DCJS right now, do they have, and I'm sorry, Chief, I should have asked you this one too. Is there any specific program that they are making available to you guys regarding school safety and security? Is there any specific training program that they have provided to you or to any department to get that done?
DCJS is constantly coming out with training programs. I'm not particularly aware of anyone from DCJS that addresses the school resource officers, but I am aware of the training that the New York State Sheriff's Association is providing to standardize it.
Yeah, I know it, not just SROs, the whole,
Right.
the whole ball of wax.
Well,
For your guys on the road, for you know, for their responses, you know, they were talking about with the town response. You know, Mike was that you only have so many, and if everything goes bad, the response is going to be the closest car, whoever's there is going to be there. So at some point, one of the things we're going to suggest is that DCGS have a training program for specifically school safety and security for all of our departments that wish to participate, so that you have a unified reaction to what's gone wrong.
And
If it doesn't exist, I'm pretty
No,
sure
but
it
you know who
doesn't.
would teach that? Cops.
Well, geez, that's a terrible thing. But we need, again, each part of safety, again, going closer to the DWI program, has a different component
Yes.
to it. But we have to have all those components under an umbrella in a way to get them the resources they need. The teachers, the superintendents, everybody that needs help should be getting it. When it comes to our kids, and I don't want to sound cliche, it shouldn't be a revenue problem. It should never be a revenue problem. We should be able to do what's necessary. And that's our frustration is when we can't.
Perhaps we could do it with one less stadium.
Nah, I'm a Buffalonian at heart, pal. You just stabbed me right in the heart. But I understand.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Sheriff, thanks for coming up.
Sure.
Deputy, could I ask you a couple questions?
Absolutely.
So, you're an SRO now?
Correct.
How long have you been an SRO?
I'm in my 5th year at BOCES.
All
Same
in-
district.
all BOCES?
All, correct.
How much interaction do you have with some of the parents of some of the students there? Do you have much interaction?
Usually only when they're showing up to pick up or dropping off in the morning, picking up in the afternoon or for an appointment, or if they're coming in for some type of disciplinary, like a suspension.
So that's really the only time you would see them?
Correct.
Sheriff, do any of the other SROs have much interaction with the parents or guardians?
There's always after-school events. As a matter of fact, I've got a couple of them that are out there right now covering volleyball games. And so they do have interactions constantly with the parents. And the kids, from what I've seen, are pretty excited to make those introductions. Here's the SRO, because they're mentoring so positively in the school, the kids are excited to make those introductions. So rather than just, you know, when a deputy has to be on scene, when somebody is coming in to receive their, you know, the disciplinary, but, you know, again, they're not part of that disciplinary process, they're just to be present for the acceptance of it. But we just had an SRO take a position in another police department, and I got invited by the school to come in as the kids said their goodbyes. And the kids were bringing him gifts and you know, made him a cake, and they just really, you know, they're gonna be sad to see him go, because he had that much of a positive influence in their lives. And they do their best to include their families. And we have the deputies do details that are out in the public that deal with the children. You know, the trunk or treat is this weekend in Alliance. We'll have a deputy there, and it's all about the kids.
Deputy, thank you, Sheriff. Just one other quick question. Yeah, of all of your interaction with some of the students there at BOCES, do the social media, cell phones, is that a problem?
Absolutely.
Because
I'd say that's gonna come back to,
Because I've heard of a lot of things that we need to do, and I was wrong. I made a mistake. I should have asked some of the school superintendents. do their schools allow their students to have cell phones in their classes? If they were not there, would that help your job?
With a lack of, yeah, taking the cell phones away would absolutely keep the kids more focused, and that's how kids learn about when there's an incident going on. They're right there texting kids the next hallway over. Now you've got 10 of them starting to congregate in the hallway, just starting to stir it up a little more, and just adds more fuel to the fire.
Yeah, and I've seen that with bullying as well.
Absolutely.
Where it's, when I was in school, it was a little while ago. We didn't have social media back then. So when we got bullied or we were having a problem with another student, we had a break over the weekend, or we were out, gone for a vacation. Nowadays, you never get a break. It's on that tablet, it's on that cell phone, and that's one thing that I want to look at as part of the solution. So I appreciate you guys coming up tonight and taking the time, and thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
So before I bring up the next person, I think we've had a great discussion. I appreciate everybody sharing their expertise and viewpoint. We were scheduled to go from 6 to 8 p.m. and we're inching ever closer to 8 p.m. But we do want to make sure everybody who's here is able to share if they so wish. So if I'm going to call people up, if you feel like what you want to talk about has already been said, don't feel bad if you want to just say ditto, or just kind of put a frosting on the cupcake that was said earlier. So next I'd like to invite Doug Camanzo, Safety and Security Coordinator for Monroe 2 Orleans BOCES.
I'm all set, I think everything is.
Okay. Frosting on the cupcake, I appreciate that, Doug. Next I'd like to bring up the Superintendent of the Victor Central School District, Dr. Timothy Terranova.
Thank you. I promise I'll be brief. I mean, everything that was said so far really encapsulates everything I'm thinking of as the superintendent of Victor Central School District. Victor's in Ontario County, but certainly we have close relationships with Monroe County, and I was a teacher and administrator in Monroe County for many years. I'll just mention briefly about the key thing around relationships in all of this. And the first part of that relationships is something I haven't heard very much about tonight is the family. And you know what I personally found in education is this the work that we need to do with families to support parents. And I'm not talking about what's better, a single parent or a two parent or the socioeconomic framework of a family. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about the challenge of parents who are not able to, for whatever external or internal reasons, to put their kids as their top priority, to where kids are the 5th or 6th or 7th priority. And again, not necessarily because of the parent's fault, but because of external or internal challenges that they face. And why I say that is, one of my biggest concerns is that, especially as our youngest kids come to school, which is great with preschool programs now blossoming all over the state, but the county, town, and state supports that are available for those families that can collaborate with the schools to support, whether it's nutrition, whether it's medical needs, whether it's mental health needs, whether it's speech and language needs, special ed for our youngest kids, and parenting classes, parenting work to support those families that really need that support to break the cycle of having their kid being the 5th or 6th priority and moving it up to the 1st or 2nd, hopefully 1st priority of every family. And that's really critical, because if the family structure and the parenting isn't there, as you know, it becomes a much greater challenge for the school districts to support their kids and their families. The second piece to relationships is in Ontario County, and for Victor specifically, we have a great relationship with the Ontario County Sheriff. Long before I became superintendent, we had school resource officer in Victor, and we continue to have a school resource officer in Victor. This past year is the first year we were able to find the funds to be able to create a coordinator of district safety and add 2 additional security positions to our district, along with partnering with a outside security company to support our security of our district after school and in evenings. But I can't tell you the importance of the relationship with the school resource officer and our kids and our families and our school personnel. We've had an incredible school resource officer for many years, Officer Chumacero, who is currently an Ontario County Sheriff deputy. We just have a new SRO, Brittany Arnold, and they are involved with kids every day. The kids see them as a support and as a person they might go to as the highest need person that they can talk to, which is not just, they're not the enforcer, they're actually the relationship builder. And then, of course, all the added benefits we have in that relationship between our school district and the Ontario County Sheriff around our safety procedures and ways to go about safety and security is critical. We wouldn't have that without that relationship. So I want to give a shout out to the Ontario County Sheriff's Department and the work that they're doing with every school district in Ontario County and the SRO program. Because it does add so much to us, not just around the basic security concepts, but the relationships as well. And the last thing I'll mention around relationships is the relationship we have with Ontario County and the need to continue to build that relationship. We've been lucky, the school superintendents in Ontario County are meeting on a regular basis with Ontario County leadership. Mainly around two areas. The first is working together so that they can supplement mental health and counseling support in every school in every district in Ontario County, in addition to the current staff that's in the school districts. We're working on a plan with our county leadership to develop that, as well as, and again, this comes down to money, but in the old days, so to speak, SRLs were, in Ontario County at least, funded by the county, and the school districts were reimbursed for the SROs. That's not the case now. We pay for the SRO. But we are working with our county to see if we can get some funding that comes back to the school districts to support the SROs, especially in our smaller rural districts in Ontario County that may not have the funds to supply for the SRO. But certainly with everything that's going on in the world, many of my colleagues in the smaller districts around Victor are adding SROs to their districts. So the relationship between county leadership and school district leadership, the relationship between the Ontario County Sheriff's Department and school district leadership, and certainly the relationship between town, county, and state organizations that can support family dynamics and really work with our families to develop those parenting skills and then add the extra support needed for our kids at the youngest ages to not only get them to read, write, and compute certainly at a grade level by the time they reach third grade, but the mental health, social, emotional skills and family dynamics that are necessary to be successful and to work and move forward as the kids get older. So those would be my comments. Again, I echo with what everybody else said. I don't want to repeat too many things.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Next, I'd like to invite Sean O'Mara, Head of Security for the Holly Central School District.
Good evening. Just a little background. I retired from Gates Police Department in March. I went on to work as a private security for Holly. We are armed out there. We've been armed for the last 10 years out there through a private company. The private company is all retired or current law enforcement. We have the basic personality for the kids. They kind of see us just regular dress, tactical pants, regular, sweatshirts. So they kind of talk to us a little more than an SRO, but I don't want to knock the SRO because I think anything in our school district right now, as far as security, armed is the way to go. Unfortunately, our society has gone to another way. And I think this is, when my grandkids, going to be starting school next year, I definitely think it's a great idea to have armed security. I just recently took over Wheatland Chili, as well as Director of Security there. We are also armed. So it's definitely working.
What kind of, you don't have any police powers or peace officer powers?
No.
Strictly security?
Correct.
So if things start going bad, you still have to call the locals?
Correct. We have a good relationship with the local police. Again, they all know that we're either retired or currently working off duty. So we do have a good relationship. Or they stop in occasionally just to talk and walk through the schools.
Thank you.
So, with the majority of your armed security, are they district employees? Are they third party with the security company?
We went with a third party because like I said, a lot of my guys are retired, and with that pension cap, if you work for the school district, they can only make 35,000. So you can't attract a lot of guys because once they hit that cap, they don't want to work. So we ended up going the route, especially with me as the director. I'm also through a private party, but I work with the school district, and I didn't want it to touch my pension cap because I currently work for Gates as well part-time with the Wegmans detail where we stand at the grocery store. We've been doing that for the last 8 years in Gates. So, again, that creeps up on that pension cap, and that 35,000 gets eaten up quick.
So, with being technically as a third-party employee, as a vendor hired by the school district, how does that work when using district infrastructure like security cameras and the security infrastructure that the schools have in place in the actual school buildings, and developing those recommendations to the administration of those schools about interacting with that type of hard infrastructure?
We have total control. Again, we're security, but they treat us like we're SROs.
Okay.
We have total control of the cameras. They look to us as far as hey, we have little Tommy in class. He's carrying a little baggie of marijuana. What should we waste the time of the local police, or should we just get rid of it on our own? So they look for our advice as well, because they all do know that we are ex-law enforcement or current law enforcement.
So, but there's no difficulty in interacting with those two school districts on recommending improvements to the security system, whether they be cameras or hard infrastructure?
Not at all, especially with me as the director of both schools. It started off as Wheatland over the summer. I got contacted by an administrator, asked if I was interested. I really wasn't looking to, because I just recently retired in March, I really wasn't looking to get into another full-time job, basically, because I was enjoying the retirement life a little bit. But I jumped in, and then it was working out with Wheatland. Week before school started, Holly Security that they had kind of crumbled a little bit. People were leaving because of A, lack of money, B, there's not enough, nobody wanted to work, per se. So I got contacted by an administrator there saying, hey, why don't you go over and throw your pitch like you had at Wheatland, maybe they can mirror off it. So basically I brought the same thing that we had at Wheatland to Holly, and right now I'm the joint for both school districts, and it's working out great.
Right. Thank you very much, Sean. And I'd like to invite Ralph Brongo, Pal Mack, Deputy Superintendent, and John Colella, Director of School Security.
Thank you for the opportunity, but we'll echo the comments that the other speakers have made tonight.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I do want to say on behalf of the task force and my fellow members, thank you all very much for sharing your expertise and your viewpoint, and amazingly, 8 o'clock on the dot. We are wrapping up. It's amazing. You know what? Talk about efficiency in state government. Maybe somebody should take a lesson. As you reflect, maybe if you were earlier in the testimony, maybe go back and talk to your colleagues. If you do want to submit any additional thoughts or comments, please feel free to either reach out directly to me in my office, or Brian or Joe, or Public Affairs, who sent the original invite. We'd be happy to take any additional information that people want to share as Assemblyman Giglio and the rest of the co-chairs are completing the report. So with that, I'll just, Joe, if you want to make any concluding comments?
All I can say is we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. This is not an easy thing to do, but a necessary one, and your input is the most vital part of what we're going to do. So I thank you for coming here tonight and testifying.
Right.
God bless.
Yeah, again, thank you all for taking the time to come here. And the nice thing about doing this in person together is when we're in Albany, when we're looking at some of these bills, different legislation, and trying to put things together, I will remember each and every one of you. I'll remember your face, what you brought here, what you stood for, and how important things are that we need to do our job there to help all of you. So thank you for taking the time to be with us this evening. Safe travels home. God bless you all, and God bless America. Thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great night.